right, let's bring you the latest on that breaking news we brought you a little while ago. A report on the fire at Parliament has revealed a litany of fire safety non-compliance issues. That report coming out just a few minutes ago. Let's speak to reporter Lindsay Dentlinger following those developments for us. Hello to you, Lindsay. Looks like nice weather down in Cape Town as well. We were all very worried, of course, before the emergency services left, the wind could pick up, but clearly that hasn't happened. I've read very briefly the report. I'm seeing lots of damning findings. Take us through what you've seen.
So as you point out, Gareth, the City of Cape Town very clear this afternoon to point out that this is merely an incident report. It's what was noted by their firefighters as they went through the buildings, checking on sprinklers, on fire hoses, on hydrants and the like. And so this is not a full investigation report, and neither will they be doing one of those investigations. That is beyond their ambit. But to take you through some of those faults that they have found, probably the most damning is that fire doors were unable to shut, Gareth. And we know how important that was in that devastating UCT fire. They were able to save very valuable artifacts because their fire doors shut down. Not so the case here in Parliament. Why? Because those doors were being latched from the outside to keep them open. Probably in the course of everyday traffic, they probably were a bit of a nuisance. And so to keep them open really meant that they weren't able to shut down, they weren't able to contain the fire. And then also a host of other things. Sprinklers, which are supposed to be serviced every 3 years. We find that in the case of the National Assembly behind me, and then don't forget there's also the fire that initially broke out in the old Assembly building, which is to my left, that those sprinkler valves have not been serviced since 2017, Gareth. They're supposed to be serviced every 3 years, meaning they were due to be serviced in 2020, and that also did not happen. And then, as the city fire chief puts it, a rabbit warren of officers meant that the fire they couldn't really track where it was going. It was very smoky. The emergency staircases were filled with smoke. The lifts in the National Assembly building behind me still continued to work, and so did the air conditioning. All things that should have shut down. And then also very noteworthy, the fire department says even though there is a fire detection and a fire alarm system, they can't determine whether it was working on the day in question because it's so damaged by the fire. But what they do note is that in neither of the buildings where that fire alarm should have gone off did it trigger at the city's fire and rescue services. So they had no way of knowing that a fire had broken out in either of these two buildings. But let's take a listen to a voice note the Mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis, sent us based on this report.
I've received the post-incident reports into the devastating fire that took place at Parliament earlier this week, compiled by the City of Cape Town firemen, senior officers who were there on the scene fighting the blaze. The report is a useful insight into what the firefighters saw on the ground, but of course it does not substitute or replace a full professional forensic investigation into the causes of the fire and whether any systems failures exacerbated the spread of the fire. In the interest of full transparency, and after having sent this to the Speaker of Parliament, we are now releasing this publicly without any further comment, in the hopes that it may be useful and helpful in determining how this tragedy happened and what contributed to it.
All right, Lindsay, here's the problem, though, is while this is a very, very worrying report that's come out, there was a fire at Parliament last year. There was a report of this report coming out that the sprinkler system should have been checked in 2017. You have covered multiple State of the Nation addresses, budget speeches, NCOPs. I can go on and on and on since these things were highlighted a couple of years ago, and you would have still covered, had it not been for the fire now, the State of the Nation address and the budget speech in what is clearly a very unsafe building.
So this is probably also another very big indictment, Gareth, is that the city's fire and rescue team, they comb these premises ahead of a big day like the State of the Nation, and they've actually attached to their report 3 reports when they came to do inspections here for State of the Nation addresses. And that's really the point, Gareth, that some of these inefficiencies were already highlighted when they've come to do these inspections. But what the city is very clear to point out is that because this is a national key point, the city doesn't have jurisdiction, it says, to come and make sure that Parliament is enforcing these safety regulations. So they come, they do the inspection, they document what they see are the shortcomings, and some of those things, as highlighted in that report I just spoke to you about earlier, were already identified during these visits when they come and check not only these 2 buildings that set alight, but all the buildings. It's even quite worrying that Teinhuis, where the President regularly speaks to us from, that the phones to alert someone of a fire are not in working order. And these are the things that the city's fire services have pointed out during those inspections. So really, many questions can be pointed to Parliament here as to why, on such occasions, they did not follow up on these points that were highlighted by the city of things that weren't working and which, during those big event days, were already posing a fire and a safety risk.
Lindsay Dentlinger, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on this. I think so many people were waiting to try and get some clarity, just meters away from the gate of Parliament. Not, of course, going to be the venue for this year's State of the Nation address or the budget speech. So let me just quickly recap for you, in case you've just tuned in, missed part of what Lindsay and I were talking about. This report from Cape Town City Fire, the Assembly sprinkler valves, the National Assembly sprinkler valves not serviced since 2017. That's 1. Here's 2. Fire doors were latched from the outside. They couldn't be closed to prevent the spread of the fire. That's 2. Here's number 3. Sprinklers did not activate in the old assembly. The emergency staircases were poorly ventilated. The roof smoke vents did not activate in the National Assembly. And the sprinkler valves in the National Assembly appear to have been closed. I've just listed 6 problems at what has been one of the first reports into how this fire started and why it was not brought under control quickly at the National Assembly. Of course, we're going to unpack that with experts and analysts here on ENCA.